language can affect, can influence our decision making, emotions, and personality. I would like to conclude with you and open a possible debate on some reflections on multilingual pedagogy in education. So, first of all, when I ask my students and also the general public this big question, whether learning a second language is good or bad, of course, nobody has any hesitations. Everybody reply, of course it's good. Speaking multiple languages allows us to interact with many people, to share our experiences and cultures. So, obviously, learning languages is really good. But when I change the question and I add this line, is it good or bad for cognitive development? Here I can see some kind of perplexities in the audience. Some says yes, of course it's good, but they are not sure. Others, they say no. So let's see why they say no. Well, first of all, I wanted to share with you some interesting quotations that I found in the literature and also during my professional practice. Let's read together the first one, which is quite old, as you can see. It's 1941. And it says, the simultaneous learning of two languages produces a mental retardation, which impedes the learning of other subjects. So basically, with this definition, bilingualism is really, really bad. But nowadays, every day almost, when I have contact with parents or teachers, I also hear sentences like this. My child's teacher said that raising my child bilingual will significantly delay his linguistic and cognitive development. The teacher strongly discouraged me and my husband to speak two languages at home. So, but let's see also the opposite side. And these are other quotations that says bilinguals are more flexible at concept formation and have greater mental flexibility than monolinguals. Or bilingualism accelerates the development of a general cognitive function concerned with attention. And the third one, look at that. Lifelong bilingualism protects the brain against the onset of Alzheimer's disease. So, with this, we can take that bilingualism is really good. So, as you can see, there are very opposite kinds of situations here that needs to be explained and addressed. And how we can address this? Well, just by providing scientific evidence. Nowadays, there are lots of studies that target children, adults, multilingual speakers, and these studies can provide the evidence that we need to say whether being bilingual is good or bad. And let's see what science says. Here we are talking about neurotypical development, so children and adults that have no any kind of mental disorders or developmental disorders. So there is no evidence that raising children in bilingual environments is actually detrimental to cognitive development. Research doesn't say that. If anything, there is evidence that suggests that actually learning languages can have positive effects, even on non-verbal skills, like executive function, like the ability to switch between rooms, or suppress irrelevant information, and working memory as well. And there is also some evidence that says that, becoming bilingual and using two or more languages throughout the lifespan can protect the brain from the effect of the negative effect of aging. And the positive effects are also observed in the presence of developmental disorders, for example, autism or ADHD. Studies show that growing children in a multilingual environment, children with autism or other developmental disorder, can be beneficial, especially for their social skills, so the interaction with others. So becoming multilingual is not detrimental in any kind of circumstances, either atypically developing children or typically developed children. So this leads us to the hypothesis that bilingualism can provide an advantage. But we need to be very specific here. What does it mean to have an advantage? Because we know that it's an advantage to be bilingual, but in this particular case, and here I show one of the leading researchers in the world, Alan Bialystok, that proposes that this theory that in order to control two languages in a single mind, of course, we need to make an effort. And this effort regards the inhibition of one language that we don't want to speak and the activation of a language that we want to speak. And this is like, taking the brain to the gym to do a workout. It's a training, basically, that eventually will provide some sort of advantages in domains that have nothing to do with language. So attention, selective attention, working memory, and other skills that are non-verbal skills, to the extent that this will protect the brain from the effect of aging. But there are issues with this hypothesis because not all the research is showing that there is an advantage. So studies conducted in Spain, in the United States, and other countries, and even my own studies, do not show this particular advantage in selective attention in bilingual speakers when they are compared to monolingual speakers. And when they are found, they are very restricted to specific circumstances. Then we will see later on what they are. In my view, the word advantage is misleading anyway, because it doesn't mean anything. When there is an advantage, there is also a disadvantage, and here we don't see any disadvantages. We need to understand that this definition is really constrained to a very specific possible positive effect in attention, but not in linguistic processing in general. So nowadays we prefer to use the term effects of multilingualism, not advantage. So what I found in my own research were positive effects of bilingual upbringing in very specific circumstances, such as differences in socioeconomic status. And these findings are particularly important because we can develop educational interventions in schools where there are underprivileged pupils or children in general. And I'm going to show you more in detail what these studies are about. The first study that we started with Camila Naim and other colleagues was in 2018, and we had 90 participants. As you can see, they were all young adults. Half of them were bilinguals and half monolinguals. And they were split in two groups. One group had a very low socioeconomic status, so they were living in underprivileged conditions, and others, the other half, were actually very high socioeconomic status, so wealthy participants. And we compared their performance in a task that is used in this line of research, and Ellen Bialystok is using this task many times. It's called the Simon task, in which we measure the ability of inhibiting irrelevant information and show some kind of cognitive flexibility in changing rules and keeping the rule in mind in working memory. As you can see from this graph that I'm going to explain, first of all, this graph represents response time. So our participants, they had to perform on a computer and having a reaction to a certain kind of event. And the events were congruent trials, so very easy trials, where they didn't have to think too much. But also there were difficult trials, more difficult trials, in which they had to inhibit an action and perform the correct action in a very short amount of time. As you can see here from the mouse, if you see the pointer, the high socioeconomic status individuals, they had very, very similar performance. So the blue line is the bilingual and the yellow line is the monolingual. So there is no real difference when we analyze the data, the performance of high socioeconomic status people. But, as you can see here, there is a big difference in the performance of low socioeconomic status individuals. So, basically, the bilingual are much faster than the monolingual in the low socioeconomic status group. Of course, this is a bit puzzling because it looks like that becoming bilingual, if you are already on a very high socioeconomic status, does not provide any kind of positive effect. But it does provide a positive effect, especially in the underprivileged population. We continue this study by analyzing a very large database of young adults, or actually I would say adolescents, from 11 years old to 15, 16 years old. As you can see, the sample here is much, much larger, so we have more than 500 monolinguals and more than 300 bilinguals. And again, we split them in high and low socioeconomic status. The results here were that being multilingual in this particular age group is always beneficial. It doesn't matter if you are high or low socioeconomic status, and is always beneficial to the development of working memory, visual-spatial word processing, and non-verbal reasoning. But as you can see from this graph here, where I put some blue arrows, what is more positive is the range here of bilingual low socioeconomic status compared to monolingual socioeconomic status. That seems to have a positive effect in working memory. So, low socioeconomic status pupils, the bilingual ones, through development, they improve their working memory abilities much more the monolingual, low socioeconomic status students. So obviously these are very interesting results that need to be studied more in depth because, as I said, in our education system there are many, many situations in which we can improve the quality of education, the quality of life, especially in the underprivileged population. Now, I wanted to cover the second part here and talk about the brain, the bilingual and the monolingual brain, how they differ. And first of all, let me say that the language system in the brain is largely lateralized to the left part the left hemisphere. And this is the classical language system in which we have specific brain areas. They are devoted to, for example, language production or language comprehension. And obviously, we can read, we can store words and produce words in our first language through this system. So, one question that usually people ask me is whether there are specific areas of the brain that are dedicated to a specific language. Let's say I process my English language here on the left, but my Italian language or my French language is somewhere else in the brain. Well, the answer here is no. We use the same language system for all the languages that we speak. So, as you can see in this study, this is a neuroimaging study, the same language system that I showed you in the previous slide is used for all the languages that we speak. So, there is no different representation of the languages that we speak in different parts of the brain. So, on this side, monolingual and bilingual are not really different. But, as you know, the brain has this kind of ability to rearrange itself through experience. And this is a phenomenon known as brain plasticity. And learning a new language, of course, is a new experience that we add on top of what we already know. So, if you ask me, is the multilingual brain different or better than a monolingual brain? Yeah, the straight answer is yes, it is different. But there is no indication or evidence that it's better than a monolingual brain. And let's see some kind of differences between the two kinds of brains. First of all, there are structural differences that have been found in many studies. This is one of the first by McKelly and colleagues at UCL. Basically, through neuroimaging, they found that there are particular brain areas here. You can see this yellow dot. This is the parietal part of the brain, in which it was discovered that there is more gray matter density, so more neurons in this particular part of the brain, especially if you are more proficient in a second language. So the more proficient, the more fluent speakers of a second language, they have this part of the brain which is different. And my own studies, we found that also other parts of the brain are particularly activated, and there is also structural differences, but also functional differences in activation, in particular areas of the cerebellum. The cerebellum is a structure that sits just under the brain, but it's part of the brain, of course. Is more, the cerebellum is more dedicated to movement. So it's a structure that it processes movements. But in this case, especially the lower part of the cerebellum in bilingual speakers is more used for control of verbal interference. So imagine yourself, you are in a restaurant where lots of people talk, and you need to focus on the conversation of your friends or the person close to you, and you need to ignore, to suppress all the noise around you. Well, yes, here is where the cerebellum gets activated and helps you to focus your attention on the conversation that you hold with your friends. The third part that I wanted to cover in this short presentation is also related to how the languages that we speak can change our decisions, emotions, and personality. And there are studies that actually tell us that If you process the same information in another language, which is not your native language, so the language that you learn later in life, your decisions are a bit better, are more rational. It looks like that when you process information in your non-native language, you become really more sharp. The emotional component that is more embedded in your first language kind of disappears when you process the same information in a second language. And this is very interesting, of course, because this tells you that the languages that we speak, they can change our personality in a way. And this is also known as a foreign language effect. So people, as I said, are more rational in making decisions. They are more inclined to opt for sure outcomes. So they don't want to risk. They don't want to take risks. And they are even less superstitious in a way. So which is a very interesting finding. But I found another interesting part of this line of research, which is related to tolerance of ambiguity, or TOA. This is a personality trait. So basically, it's a tendency to perceive ambiguous situation as desirable. So basically, you don't mind if the situation is unclear. Okay, so you show flexibility in adapting to a particular situation that maybe other people don't like. And people who have a low level of tolerance to ambiguity, so they are less tolerant to ambiguity, they are found to be more stressed, more impulsive, and to be also more authoritarian. Whereas studies with multilingual speakers, they show that multilinguals have higher levels of tolerance of ambiguity than monolinguals. So, together with colleagues at the University of Trento, we examined more than almost 400 Italian-English bilinguals, and what they had to do was to complete a questionnaire, first in English and in Italian. So the same information was translated in both questionnaires. And the results confirm that processing the same information in the second language, in this case English, promoted higher levels of tolerance of ambiguity. Also, age, gender, and the proficiency, so the fluency of participants in their second language, were predicting higher levels of tolerance of ambiguity. So, from these studies, of course, they need to be expanded, and maybe also we should explore other cultures. This is just a sample in Italy, but we should replicate this study to other cultures. But it seems that it is confirmed that processing the same information in the second language leads to different results in the same person. Now, I would like to conclude this presentation with a couple of reflections on multilingual pedagogy. So, nowadays in schools there are lots of multilingual children, and obviously this is a challenge for many teachers and for many schools in many countries. And I'm going to give you two examples from my own experience. The first example was my visit to primary schools in Italy, and the second example is in London, where there are schools with a high number of EAL. EAL means English as an additional language for children, especially in underprivileged or disadvantaged areas in London. So let's start with the first one, the primary schools in Italy. I gave a talk to more than 100 primary school teachers a few years ago. And, I was just, explaining the beauties of becoming multilingual, the positive effects on the brain. So everything that I said to you this morning. And all these teachers were really happy to hear. But in the debate that followed my presentation, they criticized a lot my talk. Um, Basically, they were just saying, okay, fantastic, multilingualism is good, it's very nice to hear, but we have here many pupils that don't speak Italian at all when they arrive, and we are not trained as teachers to face such a challenge. So basically, they discourage the parents to raise their children multilingual, and they say just learn Italian, and they don't have any interaction with the parents. There is no cultural kind of exchange, and so they live in separate environments, which is not very nice, to be honest. The second example is a school in London, and I always have collaborations with them because they apply multilingual pedagogy. And this is my contact in the school, Mrs. Sofia Amin, and she's a specialist in multilingualism and education. As you can see from what she says the opposite, basically, from the Italian colleagues. In their school, they actually foster multilingualism. They encourage the pupils to speak multiple languages, and they offer all the teachers there are very committed to create a harmonious environment in which the multilingual pedagogy is applied. And I have to say, this school has been rated as outstanding in England, basically. So what they do, it can be a model for many schools that have a very high level of expression. As you can see here, 95% of pupils, they don't speak English, basically, when they arrive. Still, the school is an outstanding school in England because of the work of Sofia and their colleagues. But I would like to know, maybe if we have some minutes to speak, I would like to know what you think about it and what is the situation in your country, for example, with multilingualism. So the takeaway message, and this is the conclusion of my presentation, is that there is no scientific evidence that multilingualism is actually bad for cognitive development and school attainment. If anything, there is evidence that bilingual upbringing can be beneficial, especially in low socioeconomic status situations. But what is very crucial here is that scientists like us should really engage with parents and educators in order to inform them for the reality of this. So providing scientific evidence and spreading the right message. So this would not cause misleading information or misinterpretation. If you're interested to know more about multilingualism, at UCL, I organize a seminar series every year, so there are lots of international speakers, and these talks are completely free. So if you are interested, please email me, and I'll tell you how to register to this talk. And I conclude by thanking all my collaborators. They are fantastic people, and I couldn't do anything without them, really. So thank you for your attention, and I can take your questions if there is time, of course.
Right, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Roberto Filippi, for this very insightful communication. Where I think that it was one session for those students and teachers as for knowledge. And we have learned a lot from you. This is, this is the first time that we know that the upbringing, multilingualism or multilingual has effect on the brain. At the same time, to know about the difference in terms of brain between monolingual and the multilingual and the bilingual at the same time. So it's something very interesting, because the fact to talk about the brain is something challenging, because the brain is a black box, and no one knows about this. And you gave strong evidence to talk about this, right? And speaking about pedagogy, there's sometimes a kind of worms when you face our students, our children coming from different backgrounds. They have multilingual upbringing. How to deal, how to solve this kind of worms, right? This is very challenging. So thank you so much, right? So if you allow me, I need to translate to the audience, okay? So what we have said. بروفيسور روبرتو فيليبي من جامعة لندن هو يقول في مداخلته والموسومة بأثر التربية متعددة الألسن في الدماغ وفي السلوك الإنساني. وقد جاء بفرضية ازدواجية اللغة أو فرضية ازدواج اللغة، نعم، وكذلك تعدد الألسن، والتي لها أثر كبير على الدماغ وعلى السلوك. الآن نحيل الكلمة أو نعطي الفرصة للجمهور بعض الأسئلة. So without let our hindrance, now we devote this session to debate, and I invite the audience to ask questions and to debate. So feel free. Yes.
Good morning, Prof. Thank you much for the nice presentation. So actually, when we talked about the brain, the physical part in the head that weighs almost 1 kilo, 400 grams, and that contains from 150 billion to 250 billion cells. Within each cell, there are from 60,000 to 1,100 cells, and each cell is responsible for one activity. As you mentioned, that concerning about the left hemisphere, specifically the front part, which is called bronchus, responsible for speaking, and the last, the behind part, which is called the brain, which is responsible for understanding. But my question is that when you say that, of course, you heard about the theories of the effect of acquiring second languages on the first language, such as the Bernoulli theory, which I'm totally unconvinced of such theories, because you know that the brain actually can enhance any kinds or any language that's mentioned by Chomsky in his 1957 book, Syntactic Structure, in which he presented universal grammar. Before that, of course, it was mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago, in which Allah says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Asma means all names of the languages in the world, which are 6,773 languages. Even when you compare the brain to the computer, how can the computer, so that the computer now can enhance any language, can speak any language when we put software. The same as for the brain. In fact, I don't find any differences between the one who is monolingual and the one who is bilingual or multilingual, because the brain is one, the cells are one for both. Either I speak one language or speak more than one language. So can we justify, I said you well, that there are some differences between monolingual and bilingual. So could you please justify this point, if you don't mind? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I couldn't actually hear you very well. So if you summarize the question for me. it would be great. Thank you.
To go straight forward into the target, right, and to shorten and to speak about the question. He is asking about whether there is a difference, and to give evidence, also evidences regarding the difference between the structure of the brain with regard to monolingual and bilingual. Because he said that that for all the brains are the same, right? We have, for instance, 10 billion people in the world, and they have the same structure of the brain. And how is it possible? How comes that they have differences in terms of the brain structure? Right. So this is the question.
All right. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, the brain has this kind of ability to be plastic. So the phenomenon of neuroplasticity is a well-known phenomenon, and it's related not only when you may have a brain damage or a stroke, and obviously the brain tries to repair itself. But neuroplasticity is also observable when we learn a new experience. For example, there is a study which is quite interesting, and when I was a student, I was always having this as an example regarding taxi drivers in London. So there was a neuroimaging study showing that taxi drivers in London, they had a different brain from other people who are not taxi drivers. They had a particular structure of the brain that was more developed, let's say, more dense in terms of neurons. And the structure of the brain was related to the hippocampus and the spatial navigation, memory, this kind of thing. So there was an interesting findings, and it was explained by the fact that taxi drivers, because they're always on the car and they need to memorize lots of directions and streets and ways to reach their destinations, this changed the network of their brain. There are other studies, of course, showing that if you learn how to play the piano tomorrow, your brain will not be different, will be very different in 1 year time, when you are more proficient in playing. So, basically, learning a new language is the same. When you learn new words, when you form new connections in the brain, your brain will change, which is neuroplasticity. I agree with you that we are all humans and our brain is the same, of course. We all have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, but the network inside can change in function of the experience that you do. And language is one of those experiences that can change the brain. So I don't know if I answer your questions, but this is what science is telling us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the very clear answer, right? Question?
I speak English, but so I am going to speak Arabic and translation my speech. أولا أشيد بمداخلة الأستاذ الكريم وأشيد بعدم أحادية ومركزية البحث، بحيث أنه يشير إلى مجموعة من الباحثين في مداخلة واحدة في الوقت الذي ينظر فيه الكثير من الدارسين إلى أن هذا الأمر هذا يعيب البحث، بحيث هذا يعطي ثمار جيدة وسأكتبها إن شاء الله توصيات. هذا أول شيء. ثاني شيء يعني مداخلة الأستاذ كانت في إطار عدة تخصصات، كانت دراسة بينية ما بين علم النفس اللغوي، علم اللغة العصبية، الإنسانيات، علمية اللغات. جميل جدا. سؤالي كان الأستاذ قد أشار إلى نقطة مهمة تتعلق به أنه يعني تعلم اللغات دائما هو مفيد. يعني في اختلاف بين فئة الصغار وفئة الكبار، وما يحدث نتيجة هذا التعلم اللغات في وقت متأخر من تداخل لغوي وما إلى ذلك من الظواهر اللغوية. أنا يعني بصفتي متخصصة في مجال اللسانية النفسية وقراءات متعددة في هذا المجال، فيه يعني دراسة تقول بأنه إذا لم يكتمل النظام اللساني للغة الأم عند الطفل تدخل لغة ثانية، يعني ينتج عن ذلك الكثير من الاضطرابات والمشاكل اللغوية مثل التأخر اللغوي، الاضطرابات النطقية، التلعثم. إذا نظرة الأستاذ في هذه النقطة بما أنه تحدث على النورولينغويستيك وأشار إلى الدماغ والجهة اليسرى وأنه قال يعني هذه الوظيفة لا تتغير مع تغير اللغة، يعني تبقى ثابتة. أحب أن يعني يفسر لنا الأستاذ هذه النقطة. شكرا لكم جميعا.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The teacher asked a question. She said that, first of all, she thank you so much for your very clear, insightful communication. And she said that you travel and you speak about different things at the same time. You have learned different things, psychology, the brain, the structure of the brain, pedagogy, teaching, the bilingualism. But she has, a reservation regarding, and you spoke about teaching and learning different languages, it's very good. But she said, at the same time, there is a problem, right? Because especially she is teaching linguistics, and she said that, for the student or the children to know and to learn a language, there should be one thing. There should be, a complete learning of the grammar of the mother tongue, right? So if there is no learning of the grammar of mother tongue, so teaching and learning another language fails. But how could you explain this?
Right, okay, that's a good question. Obviously, I'm not a linguist. I have contact with lots of linguists, and they share the same concern of your guest. Learning the first language provides a solid base also to learn other languages. So for educators, it's very important that a child could learn, very well at least one language. But the situation that I described there, they were quite different. In London, but in many other countries, and the Italian example is one of them, at the moment there is a very large wave of immigration. So there are lots of children that they arrive in the country. They don't speak the language of that country at all. So they have to go to school, right? So they know already their first language, of course. They can speak, I don't know. For example, the school in London, they have 95% of bilingual children, and mainly they come from Pakistan, from India, from other countries where they speak other languages like Urdu or Punjabi, or So they come to England and they can't speak English at all. What do we do in these cases? What do the teacher can do? Do they say, okay, let's forget about your Punjabi or your Urdu language, and now you need to speak English, and that's it? Well, this is, of course, a very bad for their culture, because by changing your language and completely forgetting about who you are, where you are from, well, this is very bad also for your cultural heritage, even for talking to your extended family that maybe is still in Pakistan or in other countries, right? So this kind of approach that is used in the school in London that I show you as an example, but there are many others, of course, they try to, of course, to teach English these pupils because they live in England, so they need to speak English. But the approach is not that traumatic. It's not like, you are discouraged to continue your native language. No. Actually, they encourage the pupils in the school also to use the language that they know. Obviously, the teachers, they can speak, all languages. So it's a very particular situation. The application of multilingual pedagogy is very difficult. It's very challenging. That's why, many teachers are not trained. They can't do it. But my point is it right to say to a parent or a student, now, from now on, you speak only English, and you need to forget your own language. Is it right? Well, I don't think it is. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. فهو ترجموا لكم بعد. معلش English.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your expertise and experience in the field. I would be so grateful if you tell me your point of view concerning the research conducted at the City of Toronto from the work of Professor James Cammons concerning language proficiency, who has divided language into basic communicative language proficiency, which takes 1 year to be acquired, and cognitive academic language proficiency, which takes 6 to 7 years to be acquired. So my question is, do learners cope with academic demands at the level of university or in schools in general? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, this is a very, very interesting and important question. And you are touching something that is very dear to me. I completely disagree with Cammons. Completely. Of course, Cammons, is a big name, and everything that has been done in the United States, I think. All these theories, academic proficiency, this label, this chronological label, it takes 7 years to become academically proficient. How do you calculate 7 years? I mean, there are obviously individual differences. Some people are more talented in processing languages, others are not. 7 years. I completely disagree. And I heard a few people just repeating what Cameron says, like it was, the real, the total reality. So, no, it's not. I can show you data, for example, from my own research, which I didn't include today, but, I'm happy to share it maybe if you invite me again. That shows that children who arrive in England, when they are 5, after 6 months, they are completely proficient in English, and they achieve the same results of monolingual English speakers, if not better. Actually, there is statistics that shows that the multilingual speakers at the age of 13, they achieve much better results in mathematics, in science, compared to monolingual children. So let me say quite clearly and very strongly that this 7 years kind of constraint is utter nonsense.
Right.
Okay. Another question. Another question coming from Dr. Bahwider from the University of Mascara.
Okay. So, thank you, Professor Filippi, for this communication about the relation between languages, the brain, and behavior. I know that this is a whole process, and the operation happens in, let's say, a blink of an eye. Before uttering the word, the brain receives instruction, etc., until the instruction is entered, and then it goes to the vocal cords before I say uttering any word. So I have actually two questions about. The first one has to do with the link between all the connection between bilingualism and this neurological, trouble. You call it Alzheimer. Okay, you have mentioned that bilingualism protects from the onset.
I would like an explanation for this. What is the link between trouble, neurological trouble, and languages? The second has to do with flexibility of trying to adapt when it comes to tolerance of ambiguity. Thank you.
And thank you.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Nice question. First of all, the link between bilingualism and Alzheimer's. When I came across this line of research, I was like you, maybe confused, to be honest, because I didn't understand the link between Alzheimer's and languages. But I knew, for example, that there is this kind of phenomenon called cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve basically is related to how you live your life, what you eat, how you sleep, if you do physical exercise in your life, or you have social life, good social life, interaction. All these are ingredients that form the concept of cognitive reserve. Basically, you live better, you age better, and your brain can be protected from the effect of neurodegeneration. What Bianstock said, proposed at the beginning, was that even being bilingual can be another ingredient to add into the concept of cognitive reserve. And she said, well, because there is a bilingual advantage in switching, in processing information, and I think you all are bilingual, and you all switch languages in everyday life. You speak a bit of English, a bit of Arabic, or whatever, French, or whatever language you know. But this process in the brain is like, as I said, training. If you do it every day for all your life, it can protect your brain because your brain is active. But your brain can be active also in doing, I don't know, some other intellectual activity like mathematics, or simply sleeping well and eating well. So, the evidence for this is been provided by some studies that have shown that bilingual speakers, they do develop Alzheimer's, unfortunately. I mean, it's not that they don't. They do develop Alzheimer's, but it looks like they do it 5 years later than monolingual. So it looks like that, language being bilingual for all your life can protect the brain for a bit longer than the monolingual brain. If you ask me, is this true? Yeah, I can say it's true because it's public research. But there is also counter evidence that doesn't really show this. So I think this field needs a bit more research to be confirmed. Regarding your other question, you wanted to know a little bit more about tolerance and ambiguity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, as I said, tolerance and ambiguity is a personality trait, and the way that it's been studied is through questionnaires. So basically, there are lots of questions like if you are in a situation in which there are lots of people that you don't know, but there are also people that you know. What do? You go to the people that you know, or you are trying to maybe make new friends. So there are several questions that show your openness to you, to challenging situations. And you know, this is a measure of tolerance or ambiguity. And the studies show that people who are multilingual, or they've been abroad for many years, so they were immersed in different cultures, they have a very high scores of tolerance and ambiguity. And this is quite, it is interesting because, you know, in real life, let's make a real example. And I can actually talk about my own experience. I am an Italian person, working abroad, of course, I work in England. My English, obviously, is not like a native English speaker. So I have my accent, which is Italian accent. And sometimes I can see that particular people, even in my work, they don't actually like the ambiguity of my way of talking because I have an accent. But there are others that they don't care. Actually, they welcome that people they sound different, they have different accents, and you know, these people are more tolerant to the ambiguity of the message. So learning languages, learning multiple languages requires a very high level of tolerance to the ambiguous processing of different sounds. And English is one of the languages that is not very transparent, for example, not like Italian. And being a bit more tolerant, it makes you probably a better learner of a second language. Have I answered your curiosity?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Allow me to tell you, Professor Filippi, that all the audience here thought that I'm making right.
Thank you very much. I can tell you that I'm not, and I can speak English, of course.
We are taking English from the horse's mouth. Okay, so if I could have two questions. Monolingual people. I don't think that there are monolingual. Why? Because I'm better English when we speak, we translate. I don't think that there is dualism, right? Because I teach cognitive psychology and psycholinguistics, and I can say that speaking first we have three processes. The first is conceptualization, then formulation, then articulation. Before formulation, conceptualization and articulation, there is one process of translation. I'm not a native speaker, I'm Nigerian Arab, before speaking, there should be the process of translation. I have ideas in my mind, then I translate that. So I'm not monolingual, right? This is on the one hand. On the other hand, you spoke about multilingualism, enlightened people, and they can have a great degree of openness and empathy towards the culture of the others and intelligence, right? But I can prove, according to my experience here, even though here in Algeria there are people who know about one language, is Arabic, but they learn around their heart, okay? And speaking about children, students at university, and they make better results in learning and teaching. Yes, of course, multilingual. I totally agree with you about multilingual. What about the people who have only one language, right? Using translation, and they learn and they do better in learning the second language acquisition and getting results in mathematics and other branches.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. For the second question, I think I will need to get more clarification. I can answer the first one about monolingualism. Well, I agree with you. I'm a monolingual, so maybe they don't exist anymore. There are no real monolingual in the world. Because if we think that everybody has some kind of knowledge of a second language because we study the second language in school, the classical definition of monolingualism is that you are not using two or more languages in everyday life. So basically, you can translate what you say in different language, but this process can be quite, effortful because you don't have the proficiency or the fluency of speaking two languages in everyday life. So basically, these people are more categorized as monolinguals rather than multilinguals. You become bilingual, multilingual when you can actually hold a conversation in two or more languages, you can switch to languages, you can talk about everything in two languages. That's, I don't know if I answered your question. For the second question, can you please summarize it again for me, because I'm not sure it was clear.
All right. So I said that. You said that multilingualism can help tremendously in acquiring other languages and protect people's brains from different diseases. I can hear that what we use here in Algeria, they use only Quran, the Quranic verses, right? They learn and this can help tremendously in protecting the brain from Alzheimer and strengthen memory that is of thinking, right? And so on. So this is the question. So there is no multilingualism. There is only Quran.
Well, okay. But you said that learning deeply the Quran can stimulate working memory processes, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's fine, because this is related to the concept of cognitive reserve that I was mentioning before, which is not related to multilingualism. Keeping the brain active with very kind of strong activities like memorizing verbs or pieces of text and processing these complex text every day. It's a good training for the brain. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be that contributes to cognitive reserve. The point, of course, this is very related to your country and other countries that apply the same kind of thing. But it's positive because obviously the brain is always updated. Working memory is really, well trained, and eventually this offers positive effects on the brain, regardless of the monolingual or multilingual.
Right. So if I may understand, there are some areas in the brain that should be activated, right? So we have to activate this by means, or language, or Quran, different languages. So they are asleep, to somehow they are asleep, and we have to activate them.
Yeah, I mean, the more your brain is active, and the better for the preservation of cognitive abilities, of course. Yes. Obviously, I mean, what you said is more related to kind of, to the religion, right? It's more religious kind of thing. But to me, in terms of, the process, the mechanism, how the brain works, is any activity that keeps your brain very active is positive, has a positive effect on the brain.
Right. I think yesterday we were in another panel, and some teachers asked about one question, and then this, when you spoke close to me, about this question, they said that whether this is at the same line, it says affiliated, but it is related to language, right? They say whether the color of the skin has, a relationship with the language. What do you think?
No. I've never encountered, to be honest.
Because it is mentioned in Quran. I can give you the verse, the Quranic verse.
Okay, but sorry, I don't know the Quran. I'm not myself. I'm really sorry. I can't really answer that side. I can tell you that there are issues in the society where there is discrimination of people, language, even accent of languages are discriminated, but they are not associated with the color of the skin. I mean, in scientific terms, of course. But now, this is something that is not really my field, to be honest. I can't really say that. I don't know anything about it.
Okay. There's another question coming from part of Professor Baraka from the University of Mascara.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your insightful presentation. Language in use may change your emotions, decision, and personality. Is it possible to tell us about your own experience? Has the shift from Italian to English, for example, impacted or changed your emotions, decision, and personality?
Okay, thank you. That's a nice question. Right, my own experience. First of all, when I have to do something that is quite demanding for my brain, like, I don't know, counting numbers, I don't do it in English, I just do it in Italian, because, I learned mathematics in Italian when I was a child, and now I mean to do calculations in English, it would be very difficult. And in terms of emotions, when I express I don't get angry many times, to be honest with you. So it can happen when I drive in traffic that I'm a bit stressed out, but I'm generally quite calm. But if I have to express an emotion, being love or anger, I prefer to use my Italian rather than English. But this is because maybe I learned English a bit later in life. I have my children, for example, they are native speaker of two languages, so they are born bilingual, and they express emotions in English or in Italian. They don't have any problem. So I think the age of acquisition here is important. In my experience, as I said, I prefer to express my emotions more in Italian and to do some kind of complex activities like calculations in my first language rather than English. Did I answer your question?
Thank you, Professor Roberto Filippi, for this very insightful debate and answering questions. I think because time is busy and the head of the conference is waving to me to stop. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your questions. It was really nice to meet you. And the other
Last question.
Okay.
الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أولا أشكر القائمين والأساتذة والدكاترة على هذه الملتقى الدولي حول اللغة والترجمة والإعلانات. ويحضرني قول المرحوم الدكتور حول اللغة. يقول في كتابه اللغة يجمع بإشارات الرموز. نقفز وراء هذه الإشارات الرموز للدخول إلى عالم المعاني. واللغة هي عالم المعاملة والدماغ كما يسميه البعض هو الرغبة السوداء. ولكن أحيانا دماغ الإنسان وليس خالق الإنسان قد يكون عاجزا عن الترجمة. في كتاب المستشرق الفرنسي ورسبيك بوكاي في ترجمته للقرآن الكريم والمتصفح لهذا الكتاب ويتابع الآيات وكيف ترجمها فإنه يجد هناك خلل في الترجمة في التقديم والتأخير. لماذا؟ لأن الإنسان هو الذي يترجم فقط من خلال هذه وأشكر كذلك الأستاذة على قولها بأن الطفل يتعلم لغة الأم، ولكن السؤال الذي يطرح ما هي لغة الأم؟ هل هي اللهجة؟ هل هي اللغة الفصيحة؟ وقد سبق أن عقد مؤتمر أو ملتقى وكالة الإنسان منذ 3 أشهر بعنوان لغة الأم. لغة الأم كانت هناك مداخلات قيمة في هذا المجال. إذن فكما ذكر الدكتور بأن اللغة وجاء بالآية الكريمة بأن اللغة توقيفية من عند الله سبحانه وتعالى وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها، وإن كان البعض قالوا بأن الأسماء ليست لغة وإنما للعرب. وشكرا.
We thought that this is a question, but I think that this is a comment from speaking about mother tongue. I do not think that you are a linguist, because you said it before that you are not a linguist. So he is asking, what is mother tongue, right? So I think that we need some specialists, some linguists to answer this question. So without further hindrance, thank you so much, Professor Roberto, for this very insightful communication. You tried to give us the opportunity to fuel the subject matter of brain and pedagogy, tolerance, ambiguity. So thank you so much, right? And I think that we stop here. Thank you, and we hope we meet in another. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we will have a short break, and then we you know, we start the conference with 1, 2, 3, Ali Kant and Fima at Hussein University, Francis d'Egypte, Professor Zorgi from University of Kansas, Professor Ahmed Mahmoud and Professor Yusuf Tekwani Omar from University of Benghazi, right? And right. Okay, so and Professor Ali Kashurit from University of Algiers. Right, so we have a short break and we come back here to the panel. Thank you so much.